Hello everyone, Crash here, this is RTA Motorsports. Today we're finally going to be talking about the Ryzen 9 5900X and compare it to the 3900X we have back there in terms of sim racing. If you're here for sim racing, you're in the right spot. Here we go.
Welcome to RTA Motorsports.
Alright everyone, so if you're new to the channel, you would know I pre-ordered this thing quite a while ago, November 5th to be exact, from B&H. It just came in about a week and a half ago, maybe even 2 weeks ago. And sorry this video actually taken a while to kind of make, because I was actually having to switch the CPUs back and forth just to make sure my test results are accurate for my system. There's some very minor oddities. We'll go into that later on. But as far as a CPU launch, I do gotta say, so far this feels the most stable that I've ever experienced. The 3900X was not bad. I didn't have huge issues there, besides sometimes hitting RAM timings that I should have been able to hit with my specific motherboard. This one here kind of just loaded up the RAM timings and really had no issues as far as stability is concerned. But let's go over the system that we're going to use to test this out. So we are running the AM4 platform, which is the most recent up until now. And we are running the Asus TUF X570 motherboard, G-Skill Trident Z RAM, 32 gig kit running at 3600 megahertz, as well as a Zotac 3090 graphics card. So as far as our testing methodologies are concerned, we are using the same 3D Mark tests as well as VR Mark tests that we kind of all come accustomed to. But as far as the sim racing titles, there's a few things that need to be said. There's two titles in particular, Assetto Corsa and Dirt Rally, that have benchmarking utilities built in. I try to use benchmarking utilities when available because it eliminates any sort of variability. All the other titles, what we try to use was actually replays of actual races. And when I tried to use the replays, I tried to use the very first lap because everyone's bunched together. And that is actually the hardest time during a race to actually get the highest frame rate. You're near the crowd, everyone's gridding up, and everyone's kind of bunched together, and it seems to have the most taxing. It seems to be the most taxing point on any system. So that's why we took the averages of the first full lap. As far as VR is concerned, because we did also test VR, we used the HP Reverb G2. Why? Because this is the highest resolution headset that we have here. I have the Pimax 5K Plus as well as a bunch of other headsets. Those headsets I have really no problems hitting 90 frames per second on. This one, we have the hardest time hitting 90 frames per second on average. So that's why we're using it. I have the most dynamic results with this headset, so that's why we're using it. So everyone, let's queue up the results. Here we go. Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed those results. I definitely found a few of them interesting, especially when we're talking about VR. So within VR, you can see how ACC is just so hard to drive, just basically off of its base presets, the VR high and the VR low. I tried VR Epic, and really, unless I plug in my Oculus or if I plug in my Pimax, I'm really not going to get any usable frame rate. It's actually dips below the reprojected 45 on the HP Reverb G2. It just makes it extremely unplayable at that point. But when we were in the VR high preset as well as the VR low preset, that's when we really started getting frame rates that were within the realm of being able to drive and felt smooth enough where we weren't experiencing any choppy visuals. Now, if I take the VR high and I kind of manage the shadows and the draw distance, then we can actually get that frame rate a little bit closer to 90. But I just want to use the base preset so that way you all have a means of comparison. Now, ACC is not really that good and hasn't really been known to be that good as far as really driving frame rates with the system. In our system, again, we're running the RTX 3090 and now a 5900X, and with the VR Epic preset, we still can't hit 90 unless we go to a headset that has a lower resolution panel on the inside. But when in terms of iRacing, their title seems to be a lot more mature as far as its drivers, and they have been doing VR in iRacing for a very long time, since the Oculus DK2 days. And I do gotta say, you know, that's when you could really sort of experience the differences. So you could see in the 3900X versus the 5900X, just that frame rate difference there. It made a huge difference in drivability and just how smooth it was in the HP Reverb G2. But also, I do gotta say, I am just surprised in general just how much the average frame rate in most of the titles increased, even when talking about my triple screen setup back there. Just going from one CPU to another, from a 3900X to a 5900X. But it must be said that the higher the resolution you are pushing through these titles, the smaller the gap's really going to be, and the more dependent upon your GPU you're really going to start becoming. So if I had a triple 4K setup, you would probably see benchmarks that look almost identical to one another, because then the bottleneck is not your CPU, it is your GPU. And that's why when we did some of these tests, some of them I was able to actually run DSR, or that's NVIDIA's dynamic super resolution setting, where we were able to basically super sample the title. I know someone in the comments on my YouTube page asked for R Factor 2 at 8K, please. And I apologize about that. For some reason, I couldn't even adjust the resolution R Factor 2. I'm going to have to uninstall it, figure out exactly what happened there, because I couldn't even run DSR. But most of these titles, what we did was we ran them at 1920 by 1080, just a single panel. And then I ran them again at 3840 by 1080 for the 49-inch ultra wide that we have here. And then using DSR, I was able to then go to 7680 by 2160. Now, the neat thing about that is the 3840 by 1080 is a little bit less pixels than what you would experience on a 4K panel, but a 7680 by 2160 super sample in DSR for NVIDIA, when you're running a title like that, it actually puts it square in the middle of total pixel count for a 4K versus an 8K panel. So then we kind of jump 4K, go straight to 16 million pixels versus 8 million pixels on a 4K, or 33 million pixels on an 8K panel. So you kind of get an idea of the scaling differences going from one CPU to another, and you kind of get a picture as to what would happen. And pretty much if we went to 8K, it becomes more of a GPU test rather than a CPU test, because the GPU, again, is becoming the bottleneck at that point, and the CPU is having to wait for the GPU to catch up instead of the other way around. When we were running our 1920 by 1080 tests, or even in iRacing, where you didn't really see a change in resolutions, because I spent a lot of time kind of fine-tuning my setup, my triple screen setup. So I just ran the triple screen setup to 5760. Is it 5760? I think it's 5760 by 1080, which is my triple screen setup over there. I ran that for each sort of CPU. That's why you didn't see too many different resolutions pop up there. But when we were running our 1920 by 1080 panels or that triple screen setup, you really seen sort of the frame rate differences there, because at that point on those lower resolutions, especially with running on RTX 3090, the bottleneck's no longer the GPU, it's the CPU. Can that CPU keep up? And that's when you actually see the differences from one to another. So really take a look at your system. If you're thinking about upgrading from the 3900X to the 5900X, take a look at some of my results I posted, as well as take a look at some of the resolutions and kind of see where you're at. A lot of people are now running to 1440p panels, and they're running triples in that, or they're running actually triple 4K panels. If you have a 3900X, I don't know if upgrading to a 5900X is really going to give you the results you're looking for, but if you're running triple 1920 by 1080 panels, or if you're running a ultra wide like this one here, the 49-inch Samsung ultra wide that we have used for a long time now, that's 3840 by 1080, or if you're using that panel, you are going to see quite a difference in some of these titles. And again, I am still shocked at some of the differences we have seen just from upgrading the CPU. Well, everyone, I'm Crash. This is RTA Motorsports. Thank you so much for joining in and supporting this channel. If you have any further questions, leave them in the comment box below. We definitely have other videos in the works. Again, I am sorry some of these videos are taking a while to come out, but now that we got the office completely set up, I'm going to do a room tour very soon. I've been waiting for this guy to come in for that tour, so I'm not saying what's coming in the future. It's now in the system. Everyone, I'm Crash. Be safe, be happy. I'll catch you all next time.